Hello everyone, and welcome finally to Monster Mondays episode 17. As this is still my birth month, I'm still working on getting the compilation together for the entirety of something that's a collaboration between my two channels. However, while I'm doing that, I'm filming these and trying to release them as close to on time as possible. Though, as of recording this, it's been quite a while. I just have been very low energy lately, and something about summertime, I just want to sleep in every chance I get. That helped as I'm working a couple of jobs this week, so it is what it is. In any event, y'all don't care about that. I'm just going to go on with the show. And so if there's a bunch of episodes uploaded within a few days of each other, it's because I was late, so... But I tried. At least I got the episodes out to you, even if it wasn't on time. With that, today we are going for a abstract horror theme. That is, creepypastas that have to do with seemingly non-sentient objects, or things that just don't really take a human form in how they present themselves. Things like arcade machines, or characters that aren't human, such as Rap Rat, or maybe a theater. Now, Rap Rat's a little less abstract, but it'll play nicely with one of the later episodes I'm going to do with respect to getting you in the mood for what the theme of next week will be. That being said, let's begin. Music by Muji. You'll find it in the credits below the playlist I used. In Portland, Oregon, in 1981, an unheard of new arcade game appeared in several suburbs. And if you don't hear the music, that's okay. You know, just pretend it's there or listen to your favorite thing, I don't care. Okay. In Portland, Oregon, in 1981, a new unheard of arcade game appeared in several suburbs. Something of a rarity at the time. This game was called Polybius. The game proved to be incredibly popular to the point of addiction, and queues formed around the machines, quickly followed by clusters of visits from men in black. Rather than the usual marketing data collected by company visitors to the arcade machines, they collected some unnoted data, allegedly testing responses to the psychoactive devices. The players themselves suffered from a series of unpleasant side effects: amnesia, insomnia, nightmares, night terrors, and suicide, appearing as having been caused by the game in various versions of the legend. Some players stopped playing video games, while it is reported one became an anti-gaming activist. And then we have an alternate story. Polybius is an urban legend about a rare arcade game released in 1981. The game was created by a mysterious company called Sinneschlochen, or German for sense deletion, and was a puzzle shoot-'em-up somewhat like Tempest. Only a few suburbs of Portland, Oregon ever had a release. It was supposedly trendy, with people forming long lines to play it. However, players reported strange things about the game, such as hearing a woman crying or seeing grotesque faces out of the corner of their eyes. Players would also have nightmares, experience nausea, headaches, blackouts, or even develop amnesia. Some even committed suicide. Others stopped playing video games altogether, and at least one became an anti-video game activist. According to the owner of the arcade, men wearing black suits would often come to collect the records of the game. From the game. They did not take any money, simply data and gameplay. Because of this, the leading theory is that this was some sort of government experiment using subliminal messages. The game remains in obscurity, as around 1 month after its release, all of the cabinets suddenly disappeared. One cabinet reappeared in an arcade in 1998, but quickly disappeared again. While some have tried to recreate the game, no one has ever found the original ROM. Sinneschluchen. The game can be found available for download at Sinneschluchen website. In the media, since the urban legend flowered into the phenomenon it is now, there have been many alleged sightings of the Polybius game and a few short videos about it. Credit to Anonymous. And now, for our second... Before I move on to our second story, I should give my final thoughts. Final thoughts? Well, it's interesting to think that there might be an arcade game that maybe people knew about but forgot it existed or had some unusual effects. I mean, there are things called seizure warnings that are put on some video games nowadays because, you know, gaming was a fairly new medium, and not much was known about, like, what causes epilepsy and not. There were even a few TV show episodes that suffered from this, including one of the Pokemon episodes where there's just way too much flashing and everything. I'm not a doctor, but, you know, it wouldn't surprise me the least that, you know, some people might have these mental effects if it was a fairly new game and nobody knew what they were doing when they were putting it together. And considering that it has an actual ROM that supposedly is the game, it makes it all the more believable that maybe this was something that, you know, would have been tested. Whether it's a government experiment, I cannot say, but nevertheless, it's the sort of thing that it could have existed, but I'm not so sure that I believe the story at all. But those were my thoughts about that story, and now we move on to The Theater, which is another kind of, you know, gaming type deal where you're given a game that could possibly exist because the PC makes a lot of things possible, even things that shouldn't be. So, with an open mind, let's read on. Have you ever heard of an old PC game called The Theater? Yeah, I didn't think so, probably because many people say it doesn't even exist. You see, The Theater is an old computer game released around the same time as Doom. Today, if you ever find it, it's only available in crappy bootleg CD-ROMs, which more often than not don't even contain the game. The actual copies they say were released feature a blank cover with nothing but the sprite of the ticket taker. He's simply a poorly drawn, pixelated Caucasian bald man with large red lips, wearing a red vest over a white shirt and black pants. He's completely emotionless, though some say his face is shown as angry. The next time you look at the cover, if you smash the disc... But this is just dismissed as an urban myth. However, what is peculiar about the theater is that there is no developer named on the jewel case nor a game description on the back. It's simply a ticket taker on a white backdrop on both sides. The game was initially known for its inability to install correctly. Installation process immediately locks up the computer when the user reaches the licensing agreement. Also strange about the licensing agreement for the theater is that whenever the development studio is supposed to be named, the text is simply a blank line. Anyways, most people who have claimed to own one of the original CDs say they figured out how to install the game by simply rebooting their computer on the licensing agreement with the disc still inside. They're prompted to press I agree on startup and they continue with the installation. The game then starts up without any introduction besides the main menu, simply the sprite of the movie theater's exterior on an empty city street. The title fades in and 3 menu buttons, new game, load options. Selecting options immediately crashes the game to the desktop. Load is said not to function at all. Even if you do have a saved game, nothing happens when you press it, thus new game is the only working menu option. Once it is selected, you are in first-person view. You're standing in an empty movie theater lobby except for the ticket taker standing in front of the dark hallway, which one can only assume leads to the theaters themselves. There's nothing to do but look at the poorly drawn, mostly illegible movie posters or approach the ticket taker. Once the player moves towards the ticket taker, a very low-quality sound clip plays saying, "Thank you, please enjoy the movie," along with the speech box saying the same thing. You then walk into the hallway and the screen fades to black. You're back in an empty lobby and do the exact thing repeatedly and again. While this may sound like a really horrible game, several peculiar things occur as you continue to play it. The number of times you have to continue into the hall after giving your ticket to the ticket taker before the strange events happen is unknown. Most state is completely random and can take anywhere from the first playthrough to the 400th. When that happens, though, it has deeply disturbed some players. The first occurrence is when the player fades back in from walking into the hallway. This time they will notice the ticket taker is entirely absent. The player then, without any other options, decides to walk into the dark hallway. Sound clip and text box mentioned previously still play in the absence of the ticket taker. But when the player steps into the hallways, the screen does not fade out. It goes pitch black as they walk deeper into the hall. But the player's footsteps sound is still playing as they continue to push up the button on their keyboard. Those claiming to have played the original game report they felt extremely uncomfortable walking down the hallway, anticipating the whole way something horrible happened. Well, eventually the player is unable to move forward. There's nothing for a few moments before a strange sprite appears. It is similar to the ticket taker with a swirl for a face. It stands before the player. The game's original players say their bodies immediately froze up and their stomachs churned. They saw the sprite, which has been appropriately named the Swirly-Headed Man. Nothing happens. The swirly-headed man stands before them, and suddenly a piercing screech plays as the game glitches out. This lasts for a few minutes, with the screeching being continuous. The player is abruptly returned to the lobby with all the sounds and graphics as they should be. The game continues as usual for the next couple of cycles, entering the hallway with a couple of original players claiming the swirly-headed man would briefly appear and disappear in the corner of the screen as a brisk yelp sound effect plays. Then at some point after meeting the swirly-headed man, the player sees the ticket taker pacing back and forth. Though there is no walking animation, the sprite's limbs are entirely static, so he just hops up and down slightly as a substitute. His eyes are vast, his mouth open to simulate a worried facial expression. Some players noted that the movie posters had been replaced with the swirly-headed man images, which caused them to immediately turn their character's head away from the signs and approach the ticket taker. Another different low-quality sound clip plays. Still, the speech box contains nothing but corrupted characters that cause whatever text would have been in the box to be completely illegible. Due to the inferior quality of the sound, players debate what precisely the ticket taker says at this point. It was widely agreed that he says never reach the other levels. The screen fades out once again and returns the player back to their starting point in the lobby. The ticket taker is gone and the hallway is blocked by a large brick wall sprite. Touching the brick wall would immediately crash the game. That's all there is to it. No one knows what the other levels are or how to gain access to them, nor is it known why the swirly-headed man causes such acute fear in those who have seen him in the game. All the original copies of the theater have either been lost or destroyed, but the creepiest part is the fact that all the foremost players of the game claim to occasionally see the brief glimpse of the swirly-headed man out of the corner of their eyes. Credit to Anonymous. Final thoughts? A very good short creepypasta that very much lends itself to theory and plausibility that someone could actually make a game like this, even if it didn't exist as, say, a bootleg old game from way back. I mean, the technology now to recreate some of these stories is simply astounding. And I believe someone actually did a Let's Play video. Was it Some Ordinary Gamers, or where literally you're playing through this kind of a story, and yeah, there is in fact a ticket taker, a swirly-headed man, and I guess something's supposed to happen. Likewise, the Sonic.exe creepypasta that I did way back when on this channel also has its own ROM hack, and I think it's even got a full game now, or something. But you have to have all the characters survive to win the game, otherwise, if he destroys just one of them, that gives him all the power he needs to find the others, no matter where they go. But anyway, those are just my brief thoughts on the pasta. It was really well written and thought out, and it gives you just enough without giving you too much to go off of as to what it could be and who might have made it. With that, we are now moving on to the sequel to The Theater, called The True Story of the Theater. Also written by an anonymous author. Publisher's note, this story is a sequel to the anonymously authored creepypasta classic, The Theater. Before reading it, please read the original, which can be found here. Thank you. It is not something whispered about in certain circles. It is not something that comes in a plain-looking jewelry case, and not by a nameless and traceable developer. It is certainly not supernatural. The game in question is called The Theater, R before E, and was developed by the Solida Software Company. I'm pretty sure it's an English company despite the Spanish name. As far as I know, all they made was learning software. I have a math suite from them somewhere around here. So The Theater was probably meant to be some sort of edutainment game. This game was obviously never finished, probably from lack of funding or the whole company going under. The description in the story is actually pretty accurate, and it's the first-person perspective with flat sprites and 3D-ish environment, and glitchy as hell. The ticket taker has an egg-shaped body, and one of his hands is enormous and misshapen. I think it looks like he's reaching for you for your ticket. The description of the swirly-headed man is also accurate, just a glitched version of the ticket taker. But I saw a few people saying he looks like Gigius. That's not the case. The features of his face are just swirled and red because his lips are gigantic. I have absolutely no idea why this happens, because while there are a few character sprites in the game's resources, that isn't one of them. Oh, and just to clarify, the character is a bit creepy, that's all. It's not terrifying. It's never filled me with a sense of dread, it's just a bit weird. The game plays pretty much exactly as stated in the story, so accurately in fact I think the author just downloaded it somewhere and decided to make a scary story of his experiences. I'll admit some things in it can be unsettling, but not, oh my god, crap your pants scary. Like I said, the game is unfinished and very glitchy. I think the idea is to select a movie from the posters on the wall, enter the theater, and play a minigame. The minigames are glitchy and missing resources to the point of being almost unplayable, but there doesn't seem to be a time limit on any of them, so you just have to plow through until you've done something right enough times to be dumped into the lobby. What's described in the story happens if you don't select a movie. You'll be allowed to enter the theater, but since the parameter of which the game to load hasn't been set, you'll just be dumped back into the lobby. Here's where it gets a bit weird. If you continue to enter the theater without choosing a movie, odd, sometimes creepy things will happen. I'm not sure why, but if I were to make an educated guess, it would be that glitching past the minigames like this causes variables to reach values that they weren't meant to, resulting in things appearing where they shouldn't, or the game is just glitched to hell and back. It's been years, but here are some of the effects I can remember. A swirly-headed man, movie posters appearing out of their frame, textures changing color, legitimately disturbing audio issue, other characters, other areas. The last two are obviously the most interesting ones. Sometimes you'll spawn in a small room with a black floor and green walls which will crash the game if touched. Sometimes you'll appear in a room similar to the lobby with a concession stand, kind of. There's a woman behind the counter with an incredibly poorly drawn popcorn machine and soda fountain. It's all just an image on the wall. It's basically just a giant yellow concession stand mural. I don't remember if you can interact with it or not. The only character that appears worth talking about is the guy in a brown jacket on the sidewalk outside the lobby. Looking back, I don't think the story mentioned this, but to the left of where you start out, the wall is a row of glass doors looking out into the street. Outside the theater, if you glitch past the minigames enough, a man in a weird-looking jacket, I think it's supposed to be tweed, it's a mess, with a smile on his face, will just be on the other side of the door staring at you. I mean, a huge smile like Freaky Fred or Spark Brushel. Google image search if you want. Actually, since he has the same body shape as the ticket taker, he looks a bit more like the mayor from The Nightmare Before Christmas. His smile isn't creepy though, it's just broad. What is creepy are his eyes. While the ticket taker, ashtray, and other sprites will always face you, the smiling guy's anchored in place in one of the walls. His eyes, however, are always staring right at you. Just thinking about that gives me chills. Okay, well there's nothing overtly scary or supernatural about the game itself. That's one thing I'll admit legitimately scares me, like a porcelain doll. That's pretty much all there is to the theater. If you can find it somewhere, I'd recommend downloading it just to see what it's like. Oh, one thing I'd forgotten. As stated in my story, getting the thing to run is, to say the least, complex. I think someone got a hold of all the code and resources and just compiled it and added their own installer or something. Again, there's nothing paranormal about the installation, it just doesn't work well. Alright. And that was the true story of the theater. Final thoughts? A very good follow-up to the original. It's neat to know that they kind of expanded upon how this person could have possibly got it to work in the first place, and elaborated a little further about what one can expect to see if they do it right. I don't really have much else to say other than what's been said about the previous one. You know, this is something that someone could, in fact, program into existence, and I think someone actually did, because I'm pretty sure this became a ROM that someone could download, even if it wasn't necessarily made with any serious effort. And now for our next story. Well, I can't read the title on the script. I guess we'll just call it the, Oh, wait, I remember now. This one was called The Statue. Or Statues, or something like that. Anyway, you'll see the official name for it in the description below. And, yeah. Just double check something. Yeah, okay, and then our last story will be portraits, after we do Rap Rat. Okay, so this one's very short, and it just goes like this. A few years ago, a mother and father decided they needed a break, so they wanted to head out for a night on the town. They called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the two children were already fast asleep in the bed, so the babysitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later that night, the babysitter got bored and watched TV, but she couldn't watch it downstairs because they did not have cable downstairs. Parents didn't want the children watching too much garbage, so she called them and asked if she could watch the cable in the parents' room. Of course, the parents said it was okay, but the babysitter had one final request. She asked if they could cover up the angel statue outside the bedroom window with a blanket or cloth because it made her nervous. The phone line was silent for a moment, and the father, who was talking to the babysitter at the time, said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We'll call the police. We don't own an angel statue." Police found both children and the babysitter slumped in pools of their own blood within 3 minutes of the call. No statue was found. And that was Statues, or... yeah. Final thoughts? Very, very short. Probably a little bit shorter than I like them to be with respect to, you know, keeping me wondering what's going on the whole way through. But at the same time, it wasn't bad as far as like a first draft would go. I mean, this is... I don't really know how one would actually expand upon something like this unless maybe they had this be an occurrence that happened for days and days until finally it got to that end where they weren't seen again or something. That being said, could the statue have been something other than supernatural? Could someone have actually disguised themselves as a statue? The reason I ask is because I went down to the Las Vegas Strip a long time ago, and I remember these people, you know, were costumed. They look like they were statues. You might have seen them. They wear like the silver paint or something, and then they stand so still, but then when they suddenly pose, it's like, whoa, they're alive. So that's what I think that angel statue could have been, considering that there was no statue when they came back, and then on top of that, you know, they were killed, so yeah. So I think it was someone who was costumed as a living statue, I think, that killed him. Anyway, now we're moving on to our next story. It's called Rap Rat by Canadian Cowboy. The terror begins. Ever heard of Nightmare? Like many games in the 90s, it came with VHS that you timed with your play. The character on the video would give you instructions on what to do while you played the game in real time. Being a scaredy cat, I refused to play it when my mom bought it for us. Well, that reminds me, there actually used to be a game, I don't remember what it was called, but you'd press this console thing. It wasn't quite a VHS, but it was still kind of an interactive game in a similar concept. And you pressed it, and then this voice would say, "You have 45 minutes until I take over." And then you'd hear a series of, things like this other, voice that I guess is the protagonist or whoever you're trying to save is like, "Red, hurry, you're running out of time," or things like that. If anyone can find out what that game is, I've been Google searching it to hell and back and I have not found it. If anyone remembers what it is, has that game, can tell me the name so I can look it up and get a copy. I think my mom might even have it still, I'm not sure, or maybe she sold it. But yeah, if anyone knows a game with that description, let me know in the comments below. I'd even be willing to pay you a modest sum of money, for helping me track down that game, and just for nostalgia's sake and for clearing up that little memory I've been trying to fill in the hole for, as far as making a memoir. Which reminds me, I've also submitted a couple of my own works to the Reedsy blog for the Sad Your Days show, as well as, a chance at $50. Why not? I got a story in me. Let's see if it's any good for them. But anyway, that commentary aside, I'll resume. The character in the video would give you instructions what to do while you played the game in real time. Being a scaredy cat, I refused to play it when my mom bought it for us. My brother was disappointed about not being able to play Nightmare, but my mom had a solution. She brought out Rap Rat. It was cheap, dingy little thing catered to kids my age. You went around the board, collected cheese, and the first player to reach the end would win. Sounds a lot like Mousetrap, but it's interesting. That game was pretty shoddy and would hardly ever catch the mice unless it was set up just right. So what a lot of us used to do in middle school when we played it was we kind of added a story to it. And the premise was, okay, so the soldier's supposed to knock over the thing that releases the cage, right? Well, if he misses or doesn't hit it just right, the mice go free and they thank him for betraying the human race. Otherwise, it catches them and he's done his job properly. If I could only write a story for games that were that shoddy, imagine what kind of money I could make, from the companies that sell them. If I wrote lore for board games like that. Anyway, going on. It seemed simple enough, and since it reminded us of Mousetrap, I just said that, which we didn't have. There were no objections. We popped the movie into the VHS and set up the board. The first part of the video was just a simple explanation of the rules and instructions on how the game worked. Then Rap Rat came onto the TV. He was not what any of us had been expecting. My small brother, who was only 3 at the time, immediately left the room crying. The rat didn't even resemble a rat. The ears were far too long. It had a mouth lined up with 2 teeth, and the inside of the mouth looked almost swollen. The most striking part about the thing, though, was the eyes. They were large, glassy, and fish-like. I asked, then bothered, then begged my mom to turn it off. Rap Rat suddenly shouted loudly, screaming and wailing, saying, "Wait your turn!" in a demonic low-pitched voice that was not at all like his normal obnoxious nasal voice. In the background we could hear the narrator saying, "He's Rap Rat and he's the boss," over and over again in an overly serious tone. The video was indescribable. Images crossed the screen in quick succession, overcut with Rap Rat's expressionless eyes. The photos were some of the things I was afraid of at the time. A person looking over a balcony, a hornet slowly stinging someone's eye, an extreme close-up of a tarantula, a pit full of writhing cobras, and a bloodied syringe filled with green fluid. I immediately turned the video off and I ran out of the room screaming, slamming my door. It took my mom 20 minutes to convince me that the video was gone, and I would never ever see it again. I had nightmares all week about Rap Rat. That wasn't the last time I saw Rap Rat. While my girlfriend and I were preparing to move in together, I was cleaning out the closet of my room and found Rap Rat with the same VHS and the same board game inside. It was almost perfectly intact, save for a thick layer of cobwebs and dust bunnies on top of it. This was strange. Didn't my mother get rid of it? And what was the game doing in my room? I let out a bit of a gasp when I found it. My girlfriend came into the room asking what was the matter. Breathing harshly, I said, Rap Rat was... She laughed a bit, asking if it was a joke. I shook my head, explaining that it wasn't. She didn't believe me, no one did, and decided the only way to prove it to her was to show her the video. At borrowed my neighbor's VHS and played the video for her. However, the images had changed. I saw a clown, its nose bursting and spraying blood onto the screen. I saw a woman alone in the dark room. I saw a man being forced to pick up a hot white metal and hold it in his outstretched hand, turning his hand to a leathery mass. The scratching I heard as the child continued, picking up louder and louder. Then Rap Rat showed up and began twisting and convulsing, its arms thrusting this way and that. The costume wasn't a costume anymore. Felt was real fur. Its face wasn't plastic, but instead a bristle of thorns and teeth. The eyes turned inwards and suddenly popped out again. Rap Rat's huge fish eyes were inside out, staring right at me, watching my every move, my every expression. It grinned widely and gestured at my girlfriend and me with a single outstretched inhuman hand. I could hear the faintest scratching at my door. The TV went blank and showed static as the grating got louder. It wasn't scratching anymore, but thumping of tiny feet on the wood. My girlfriend embraced me in fear. My senses kicked in before anything else could happen. I stopped the video, ejected it, and unplugged the VHS. The scratching stopped. When I looked out the living room window, nothing was there. The police showed up soon after, warning us that the neighbor had seen a figure outside our door and called in concern. My girlfriend and I simply couldn't explain what had happened, and we had to tell the police officer that it was us. I was furious that a children's game was terrifying me. I went to pick up the tape, but the VHS burned my hand. It felt like it had touched a Bunsen burner on the highest setting. We had to get the oven mitts from the kitchen to take it out, and even then it was scorching hot. I brought it outside, tossed it down the sidewalk, and crushed it with my winter boots. My girlfriend and I had nightmares every night. We would both wake up in the middle of the night and describe eerily similar images we saw in our sleep. The scratching would always be there at night when the lights were off. The room was pitch black save for the moonlight coming in through the window. Although the scratching would happen every time I went near the front door, and every time I said Rap Rat's name, it sounded as if something tiny was dragging across the ground outside of the door, pacing, waiting. I would simply wait. The covers piled up to my neck until I succumbed to exhaustion. At this point, I was determined to sue the company for damages. First thing I did was call my mother and ask her where she got Rap Rat. She had no idea. I found a merchant who sold versions of Rap Rat and asked how I could get in touch with the company. He sent me this email. I don't know about the game, but I know that it was created by the same people who created Nightmare. The company, a couple of cowboys. Try them. I did a bit more research and discovered that the company became defunct in 1994, only 2 years after the company created Rap Rat. I realized why soon after. How Rap Rat came to be. In 1992, the year of the game's development, a couple of cowboys had commissioned a manufacturing company in Haiti to create the doll portrayed in the game. The company that created the puppet ran a sweatshop, where they forced women and children to produce the various components of the object, including the felt and plastic of the doll. One day, a young Haitian girl got her arm caught in the industrial sewing machine. The spring loader, unable to handle the weight on the device, came loose and struck the child's neck, killing her instantly. A few days after the funeral, the child's mother went to the factory, demanding to see the owner, who denied that he had anything to do with it. In a fit of rage, the mother said, "The blood from the innocent would seep into every crevice of the doll. Every component with which it was created, and all who touched it would die." She claimed to have summoned a fear demon and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Apradat will curse you!" The owner simply laughed and told the corporate bosses about Apradat. They spread the joke from person to person, and the game was renamed Rap Rat, a loose anagram of Apparat. Each recitation of the name Apparat brought with it a greater and greater curse. Only 2 years after Rap Rat was created, the company was shut down and the owners were hired by Mattel. There were stories of the workers begging for days off, skipping work for weeks, finding the puppet in strange places. Sooner were the stories of suicides, grim violent suicides in which the workers would stab their hands and burn themselves to death, writing "I am fear" on the near surface in blood. Nobody knows where the Rap Rat doll went after the original creators disappeared. Some say the last things the victims saw before going insane were prominent sunken fish-like eyes. Words of warning. Never ever say Apparat out loud. Saying a demon's name out loud is an invitation to them, a calling. If you've already done this, it cannot be undone. Well, I'm fucked, and so are you guys who might have heard it. Well, if it's real. 2. Do not try to speak to or contact Apparat. 3. Avoid being awake between 3:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. when Rap Rat is most likely to try to scare you. It's only 12:37 a.m. right now, as of reading this. The audio. The VHS is back. I thought I stomped on it, smashed it to Kingdom Come, but it's back. I found it in my sock drawer yesterday. This time I was ready. Many people have been contacting me trying to get the tape or some sort of video from the board game. Answer to you is it's just too dangerous. If I did that, it could very well drive you insane, scare you to death. The video in the game and the Rap Rat itself has some sort of strange power. Rap Rat follows me everywhere I go. I see little shadows in the corner or hear sounds coming down the hallway when I'm the only one home. If Rap Rat is there, it will let you know, but it will never let you see it until it is too late, of course. Many people have been watching the normal video from the normal board game. That's the thing, Rap Rat can be regular. It will trick you into thinking it's just a puppet, then stalks you day and night. Credit to Canadian Cowboy from the Creepypasta Wiki. And that was Rap Rat. Final thoughts? Well, if the legend is true about, this thing existing, I have fucked myself by saying it not once, not twice, not 3 times, but at least 4 times over. So, yeah, I'm probably not going to be sleeping well these next few nights, if it's real. If it's not, then I'll go on as if this had never happened. But anyways, if I don't survive the next few weeks or months or whatever, then, well, who'd have thought I'd be one of the few readers that didn't survive reading the story. Or survived reading the story only to die later. Anyway. That being the case, it was kind of an interesting take on it. I did happen to watch the original video way back when, and even without the story, that the Rap Rat was pretty creepy to begin with, so I can see how someone would have made up this fictitious account for that. But that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Now we will read our last story of the night, Portraits. A hunter was in the woods. It was in the middle of an immense forest after a long day hunting. It was getting dark, and having lost all his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across the cabin of a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. Nobody was inside. The hunter flopped down on a single bed, deciding to explain to himself to the owner in the morning. He was surprised to see the walls adorned by many portraits. All painted in incredible details, he looked around. They appeared to be staring down at him without exception, their features twisted into looks of hatred. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. Making a concerted effort to ignore the many hateful faces, he turned to face the wall, and exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep. Face down in an unfamiliar bed, he turned, blinking in the unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered the cabin had no portraits, only windows. And that was Portraits by Anonymous. Final thoughts? Okay, what the fuck did I just read? I mean, it's an interesting twist at the end, but like with the previous story about the statues, it was a little bit shorter than I tend to like these stories to be. And I would have liked to see kind of, a little bit more. I guess in this case, though, I do have an idea what could make it better. And that would be, what happened next, Did he keep seeing them routinely as he stayed there? Or did he leave and then he started seeing them when he got home? Because he'd visited there and so the spirits were following him? I mean, if they're spirits and not portraits. Or something, which I presume is the case since, they were, well, they looked like they were portraits, but they weren't. They were windows, so, yeah. Anyway, that concludes episodes 17 of Monster Mondays, and I thank you for tuning in. This has been The Forsaken Scribe, and remember, Mom's not here, kids.